everybody.
That was bad. Sean always gives me shit about my intro. That was not a good intro.
That was a My Dumb Friends type intro from back in the day.
That was the soul of you as an MC at the Comedy Cellar in 2200. That's what they're going to hear. They're going to hey, buddy. What was that?
How you doing, everybody? Guys.
Everybody.
You're listening to another episode of the Burbs Bros podcast.
First off, we're in a great mood because of the response we got from the Ross Cult Heart episode.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited, guys. Just really quickly, if you have not subscribed on YouTube, do that right now. Like if you're watching us on there, or if you're on the audio, or if you flip-flop if you're on your Apple Podcasts, go to YouTube. If you're on YouTube, go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast. We are burbsbrospod@gmail.com if you want to email us. Also at Burbs Bros on Instagram. And most importantly, we have a Patreon, guys. We started the Patreon and we're so excited. We got rolling already with a few bros.
These are the founders,
bros.
man. This is like this is like Neil Armstrong.
Like the Purge, the founders.
Jesus Christ. I was trying to make it more positive. But the first guy does sound like a Purge name.
Uncle Johnny?
Uncle Johnny. That sounds like a villain in The Purge. So thank you, Uncle Johnny. Thank you, Isaac Harris. Thank you, William Morris. Thank you, Duncan McRae. And thank you, Christopher Close.
And if you would like to subscribe to the Patreon, it's very easy. Go to patreon.com/burbsbros. That's patreon.com/burbsbros. And it really helps the show. The Ross episode was huge.
And you get an and for instance, like with the Ross episode, what did we get for the Ross episode? Was that another? It was just another topic episode after that, right? So okay, so like this week we're so lucky to have Dr. Michael Masters. He's the aliens or future humans guy. He identified flying objects. Terrific conversation. You're going to hear it in a little bit. But yeah, so I just completely lost track of what I was saying. Holy shit! I was like, did you see that?
You glitched.
I uploaded it.
I saw you.
But what I'm trying to say is, so like for instance, if we have like a straight interview episode like this, then our Patreon is more of topics of that week, us being funny. Conversely, if that week is a comedian episode where it's like one of our two comedian friends and we're all just talking topics, then our Patreon is going to be kind of what you've seen, like the Mac and Me review. We have a communion review with Anthony DeVito coming up, which hasn't come out just yet, and he's going to come out on the main show. So you're always going to get something very different if you join the Patreon, and very good.
Yes, it was very good. We've been having a blast. Thank you guys so much for listening up until this point. Just keep going. Tell your friends about the podcast, and you're gonna love this episode.
But we are gonna start opening every week with the real story. That's what I'm calling it right now. There's all the everyone's talking about the tariffs. Everyone's talking about bird flu, El Salvador. This is the real shit, and our The real story of the week, and yes, I just branded that now, is El Chapo's granddaughter, 18, joins hunt for Loch Ness Monster while romping through Scotland. What? The whole fucking headline feels like a Mad Libs.
It just shows that you guys, you wonder if we live in a simulation. It's very possible with that
Yeah, you see that. Yeah, you're like, oh, okay, and then the dogs are gonna start meowing, cats are gonna start barking. Imagine though, it's like you fucked up if you're like, yeah, my family won't see me in prison. Where are they? I don't really want to talk about it. No, where are they? They're looking for the Loch Ness Monster. Jesus. Well, they know where you are.
Also, you think she wouldn't do it? You think she'd have sympathy for the things that don't want to get hunted? Your grandpa's like, hey, I'm kind of a Loch Ness Monster in my own right. It took a while to find me, fucking asshole.
It becomes like a fucking... This is so dark, but it becomes like the Breonna Taylor of the cryptid community, where it's a Loch Ness Monster and they barge in. Then all the other cryptids, Bigfoots, we're people, damn it. You can't just fucking...
in an apartment somewhere.
The Loch Ness Monster the whole time. The whole time he was in corporate housing in Stamford.
So why did this make it to the... She just happened to do this and somebody saw it and then...
I think the New York Post smelled it. Yeah. Like, I think like the Post, like whenever they hear some story like this, it's like the bat signal goes up. But instead of back signal, it's just like a drawing of a dick.
Well, now that he's caught, like anything they can attach El Chapo to, El Chapo, like they're just like, hey, here's something. She just went on vacation to Scotland, and there she is.
Let me tell you,
Frida Sofia.
Let me tell you something about this Guzman family. Once he became a cartel, leader. No more ugly women in that family. A lot of real stunners, because you can't.
Also, she has a YSL bag, the Yves Saint Laurent bag, and she looks very fancy. I guess he didn't give back all the money.
No, I don't think so. There's no way, looking at a picture of El Chapo's daughter, that all those victims saw his granddaughter.
Yeah.
Then even double that, right? There's absolutely no way that those victims saw fucking shit.
You know what it was? She was just going. They have the money buried in Scotland, and they're like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Looking for the Loch Ness monster."
Is the Loch Ness? That's a terrible Mexican accent, but
she was going to the till, and she was going to get some cash, and they caught her red-handed, and she had to pretend she was looking for the Loch Ness monster.
Yeah, the Loch Ness monster. He's got the greatest shit in the moat right now, man.
Also, El Chapo. Have we ever talked about how he does not look like what he did? Like, he looks like a Mexican.
Mexicans are short.
What?
We can't. Well, a lot of Mexicans are short.
No, I didn't say he's short.
No, I know, but I mean, like that's it's hard to be intimidating when you're short. That's why Napoleon was so.
Yeah, but he looks like Alex Trebek. He looks like Mexican Alex Trebek.
He does look like Mexican. He looks like you know what he looks like? He looks like obtainable Burt Reynolds. That's a Chapo. Like, it's like when you're like, when a girl's like, I fucked a guy who looks just like Burt Reynolds last night, and then you see him, he looks like El Chapo.
He looks
and
like,
you're like, all right.
Timu Burt Reynolds.
Timu Burt Reynolds. That's what he looks like.
Yeah, like, he looks kind of like that.
I'm looking at Trebek right. Trebek just died last year, right?
I think it was last year. Yeah, it was sad because like he knew.
Pate Sajak, is he sick? I heard he was sick too.
Sajak? He's retired. I know that.
Oh, did I just start a rumor?
Wait, didn't he die? Maybe Sajak died. He didn't die.
Sajak. I just started a rumor.
Now then you know that the NHI is a real thing if tomorrow Sajak dies, because we manifested it weirdly or something. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's the most egotistical thing I've ever heard you say. That somehow we're going to be able to. It's also very Irish. I notice Irish people do this.
What?
Which is just like, because my wife does it all the time and you do it a lot. Which is like, oh, don't say that. I'm like, what do you think I'm going to magically say it and somehow the fucking pixies from our mother country are going to like, oh, let's manifest it in the ether.
Well, I will say this: on Easter dinner, we at my mom's house, we brought up the Pope smoke thing with the white and the black smoke, and the next day, dead Pope.
Well, here's another way you could have found out he was going to die, by looking at a picture of him any time the last 3 years. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the Pope the last year. He's a fucking Halloween decoration. Okay? But by the way, anyone who's
R.I.P. to the Pope.
Francis is great.
He was a great Pope.
He was a great Pope.
Great Pope.
Yeah,
like,
definitely better than the one who was the Nazi. For sure.
Yeah,
I would say 100 times better than that one.
Yeah, he definitely he was a better guy than the Pope that happened to be in Hitler Youth.
Anyway, Pope Francis' spirit, come on the show anytime you want. But we got to get to this. We were so lucky, man. We got Dr. Michael Masters. And it's an incredible conversation. He is the guy who came up with aliens are future humans, and it's the real it's a theory that really hasn't been discredited yet. I mean, like, people have poo-pooed it, but like it's not like, okay, it's not like this is not a David Icke sort of thing.
No. This is like one of the things that pops up. A lot of people think, when they're asked what do you think the origin is, a lot of people think like, hey, it could be us from the future mastering something, whatever it is.
And to your point, like every time I've explained this theory, this one is the one people have the least problem with.
Yeah.
I think they're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, even like we talk about, even they say biologically it could, if you have us a million years from now. We talk about it in the interview, right. That it's totally could happen.
Yeah, you look at those illustrations of Neanderthals, and the features are so.
Yeah, and then we just kind of like, I don't even.
By the way, if we look more like Neanderthals, we'd be much more successful as comedians.
Oh, absolutely.
We're too average looking. That's the problem. You have to look ugly or handsome.
We need caveman head.
No, we need like some sort of fucking growth. Anyway, let's. This is our interview with Dr. Michael Masters.
Thanks, guys. Take it away, Dan.
Welcome, everybody, to Burbs Bros. I am so excited about our show today. I don't know why I talked like that, but I'm very excited. This is the most legit guy we've had on our podcast.
Absolutely.
He wrote a book that I just read, Identified Flying Objects, which is amazing. Dr. Michael Masters, how are you, sir?
Good. How you fellas doing today?
Good. You're in the mix, and we absolutely love the theory that you have. I think it's one of the most, this thing, if you're in this world, it's been called the phenomenon. That's been the kind of a, the UAPs and also an adjusted nomenclature. But the phenomenon has become a thing for people in this. So, and you have your own version of what you think the phenomenon is. If you could just give us, like, just for the people who are listening, the elevator pitch on what your take, even after you just said you read your third book about this, it was satire, but still, you're in the mix.
And just one other thing, right before that, if you could just tell everyone in the audience who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great.
Who you are and
Yeah.
what your take is after being in this scene for so long. Like what your elevator pitch for identified flying objects is.
Yeah, no, stepping into the elevator. My name's Mike Masters. I'm a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Technological University in Butte, Montana. Just kind of nestled into the Rocky Mountains down here in Southwest Montana. Yeah, really beautiful area for sure. But yeah, I guess the Cliff Notes version of this idea is simply that these occupants of UFOs and the technology that they create are technologies that originate in our future, that we have a long evolutionary history on this planet, going back about 6 to 8 million years since we first started walking upright. And if those characteristics continue, if those dominant trends continue into the future, we're very likely to look like, act like, and have technology like what these purported beings who are seen in association with these highly technological craft. So to boil that down even more, it's simply the idea that these aliens are us from the future coming back to visit and study their own hominin evolutionary past.
And does the singularity, and not to jump too far ahead, but does the singularity, does it figure into part of your research as well? The idea that, because I know the idea that biologically, because we can start biologically, you can make the argument that this is what we'd look like a million years from now because of not evolution taking over and not needing to have what we have to do manual labor, whatever it is. So does AI mix with biologics? Does that mix into your theory as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been saying for a long time that some of these shorter, they
the grays,
seemingly
if you will.
represent, yeah, some of them, because there's also the tall grays that
Right.
seem to be sort of in control of the whole operation, using telepathy to guide and direct. But some of the shorter ones, I in my second book, The Extra Tempestura Model, I had a whole chapter dedicated to that very concept because it's something I overlooked in my first book, and then it was sort of a glaring thing. Eventually that, well, wait, what about the technology that we're developing now? Because a lot of what this theory does is link past aspects of human evolution, both culturally and technologically, as well as biologically, with what we see in these cases of close encounters. So, yeah, I felt that it was a bit of oversight in not addressing that before. So I talked about the Pascagoula case where Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson say they were actually abducted by robots. They say that specifically. And then, yeah, the droids seem to be manufactured. And I've said for a long time that they quite possibly are the result of the continuation of CRISPR technology, that we may be genetically modifying these. They may be biological droids or biologics, as they're called, to keep it more generally. That term's kind of come into the zeitgeist lately. So yeah, I think there's definitely something going on there. But the question that a lot of people overlook, and it sort of pisses me off, is, well, then who made them? They'll say, right, oh, well, these are biological droids or these are robots, but they don't go a step further and say, well, who made them? So
Right.
It kind of passes the buck a little bit. It's like the other one that gets me is the demons thing. That's not an answer to the question. It's just an archetype that we ascribe to this phenomenon and
with
and
limited
people's
scope.
interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's not an answer to the question. It's just a way of interpreting it or putting something on it, but it doesn't actually go the step farther. So what I try to do is show how past and current technologies, if those continue, might also play into this too. And a good friend of mine, Hussein Ali, at the University of Chicago, Agrama is his last name. He postulated this idea of a super technological singularity, similar to the singularity in AI, but that if we have technology coming back from the future and it's seeding the past, then at some point we will have access to all technology that ever exists in the future in the presence of a time machine. So that would sort of create this one point where once complete contact is made, we have access to everything in the future, all cancer
Wow.
research, all technology, all of the things that allow for time travel in the first place. So that's kind of a different type of singularity, but I credit him with, I butchered his name the first time, Hussein Ali Agrama.
So you're saying this is a hardware singularity as opposed to AI itself.
Yeah, and just a point in time where we would have access to all of that technology. So what here's a good
Basically
example.
a combustion point where all these different
Yeah.
timelines meet up, and then
Yeah,
everything's
exactly.
almost like if you've seen Arrival, where everything's happening all at once, like that kind of jazz.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. And if we think about Roswell, okay, say that was a time machine. It crashes in 1947. It's reverse engineered, and then that technology goes on to become the time machine that they crashed into Roswell. Well, the thing that pisses people off about that, or rubs them the wrong way, is probably a better way of saying that, is that there's no originator. It's what's called the bootstrap paradox, but it's not actually a paradox. It's just kind of a weird thing that happens with time travel because the people in 1947 didn't create it. It was technology that crashed into their existence, and the people in the future who flew that time machine back didn't create it because it was the result of reverse engineering that machine that crashed. But there doesn't have to be an origination point. It can always exist in this bridge that links those two places in time.
Do you, and that's one of the things that was so fascinating and also like a little bit hard for me to understand while reading the book. But what I surmised is, in your mind, like, and you kind of explained this a little bit through quantum theory too, but the timeline is just it's one timeline. They're not several timelines. That essentially this theory kind of like is under the presupposition that we have one timeline to go to, and there may be different dimensions, and there may be different dimensional realities. You can't have multiple timelines.
Well, kind of. In my first book, you're right, the one you just read, Identify Flying Objects, I stuck with the most conventionally understood model for space and time, which is called the block universe theory, or landscape time, as it's often called as well. And yeah, in that situation, there's one timeline, and you're traveling back into your past, but you're not changing anything because anything you did in that past has already manifested before you left. Because all moments are structured around this massive four-dimensional block.
It's all happened.
It's all happened. It's all happening, and people sometimes don't think of. So take this snapshot in time right now. We can look to the past, and we know our memories pinpoint things that happened that took place. But we look to the future, and it's wide open. We think there's all these infinite possibilities. However, we forget that that future is somebody else's past. Someone else in the future is looking back at that past with a great awareness of all of the things that took place. So yeah, what we have to do is kind of step back and look at this four-dimensional block model and how all of these different interactions could take place, but it doesn't create change. It doesn't create paradox because within the block universe, all of those linkages already exist. So I stuck with that for the first book. However, in my second book, I have a whole chapter that looks at the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And in that situation, you would have different timelines, different dimensions. They could be jumping across. They could be in the same time as us, just from a slightly more evolved version of it. So maybe that's why they look more like future humans. So yeah, I think it's important. We don't know yet, is the bottom line. We don't know what the true structure of the universe is. What we do think is that time is an emergent phenomenon. It comes from something more fundamental, more foundational. But until we understand what that is, we're just kind of left to wonder what time really is. But clearly, if these are future humans, they've figured that out at that point in our future.
Well, one of the things that played into it, you just said, it's interesting. You just said time's fundamental, and I was listening to an interview with it was Sam Harris's wife. Her name escapes me right now, and she wrote a whole book about the whole idea that what's creeping in now that we have so much slow disclosure, and there's so many things coming out about this phenomenon, if you will, is that the idea that consciousness is fundamental is fundamental as well. That it goes beyond the biologic form. It goes that consciousness is a fundamental element as well. So it plays into exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've kind of gone down some rabbit holes of late based on some just the evolution of this project. I've always said this is, an evolving idea. I don't even necessarily am that tied to it. Like I think it's definitely a possibility. It's something we should consider. But I think there's a lot of things going on. So I often get pigeonholed in the context of, well, this is the time travel guy, and that's it. I don't necessarily see it as being that black and white. But consciousness, I think, yes, is fundamental to everything. That it all started with this original idea and this infinite source energy, and everything just sort of grew out of that. This physical reality that we exist in is most likely just an aspect of that process of the evolution of consciousness and energy. So yeah, where does time play into that? Because it would seem, especially if you look at out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, like consciousness survives the body and almost exists in a timeless, spaceless state.
Right.
So it makes it difficult to really kind of pull all of those threads together when talking about UFOs and time travel, because I think we don't fully understand really what consciousness is, and therefore we can't understand what time and space are.
Absolutely. The Dan, do you want to say something else?
Well, I actually, this is off something you had said earlier when you had brought up demons, and it seems like one of the obstacles within this field is there are a lot of, and Sean and I have talked about this before, but there are a lot of people, particularly in the State Department, who are evangelical, and
the
in some
Collins
places
Elite or whatever, they're calling themselves.
Yes, and that are basically ascribing demonic origin to whatever thing we can't explain, which sounds very same as witch trials to me. But my question is, do you think that there is a contingent out there that's one of the reasons that disclosure has been so hard? And have you run into them?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, I did from a very early age. A lot of this started because when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I heard my dad talking about a UFO encounter he had. I'd talk about that a little bit.
I definitely want to get to that. I actually meant the have you run into the more of the State Department, like evangelical types who are like, hey, this is demonic, don't look into this sort of thing?
I see. Well, that's where I was going with this.
Okay.
My dad was that person.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. He was like one of those just Bible thumping, born again evangelical Christians who took it a bit far. I grew up in a pretty interesting household. And if you read my third book, Revelation, you'll see just how much that shaped my worldview.
Sure.
Quite unfortunately for him and most other fundamentalist.
Yeah, I don't think he's
Christians,
going to be a huge fan of the cover. I love the cover.
or the content, of the book. But people who are kind of fed up with the hypocrisy of a lot of these ideologies love the book for that reason. So I had a meeting with Eric Burleson right before the second UAP hearing, because he's part of the UAP caucus. I think he might be one of the top UAP caucus guys. But see, this is the thing. It's a little more nuanced because he's very religious, but is able to kind of see the big picture and not just ascribe these sort of archetypal ideas to the phenomenon and discount it and dismiss it because of that. He sees that there's something going on here. And even though he has a worldview that would sort of make it easier if he just stuck it in a box like a lot of people do and sort of stashed it away, he's not doing that. And this is just one individual. This is anecdotal, of course. But yeah, I have heard of these people that really see it through that religious lens, and I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's more of an individual thing.
Sure.
I really doubt that it's affecting the disclosure process too much, because I think these people, unless there's some kind of hidden deep state government where they are controlling everything, I think it's mostly just their worldview gets in the way of them seeing what's going on, and they might impose that on certain people, but I doubt it's actually a roadblock. I would think the roadblock more stems from the military industrial complex and all of the implications of the technology and how could it be used in war and revolutionizing energy. We could finally get rid of petroleum. Yeah, petroleum, fossil fuels. I think it's just, there's a lot of interests who are probably keeping it, corporate interests and military industrial complex interests. And like Grush said, some people have committed crimes around this, so that might play into it as well.
And what Dan was speaking to, like the idea that, because I know what you're saying. You're saying like, oh, is it just a red herring, or is it the idea that like they actually have these beliefs are completely genuine, and that what he's saying is they're born, it's in them, and then they're using it through their lens and being like, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. You hear so many. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I realized that you referenced this picture, and
I
your
don't know if
audience
we
doesn't.
weren't recording yet. I forgot to. Well,
Yeah, your audience
let's.
doesn't know.
You
They
know,
would probably like,
I know
what
you
are they
from
talking
Identify
about?
Flight, but please tell us your new book, and I will explain this. This cover's amazing, by the way.
That wasn't just a cheap plug, by the
No,
way.
no, go for it.
It was
No,
just
it's an
because
awesome. It is an
we
awesome
mentioned
cover.
it, so I figured.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we
No,
would,
this is a good time.
throw
Let's.
that in. But
Some punk
all
rock
right.
Jesus.
Yeah, no, Jesus was badass, and I mean Jesus was badass in a historical context. But
Sure.
this version of Jesus is pretty badass in the book. But no,
And
yeah,
real quick,
so-
if you're listening, the cover, it's Revelation. Check it out. But the cover is Jesus with the double middle fingers
Double
beneath
middle
a
fingers.
UFO. Just
yeah, hovering
great,
under,
yeah.
throwing up
You
a
can't see
double
John a
bird.
bit.
So no, Dan, the book you read, Identified Flying Objects, that one was my initial foray into this, and it is a very, as you are aware, a dense, scientific book that combines knowledge from philosophy, physics, human evolution, anthropology, astrobiology. And I really had to come into this space from that point of view because I'm talking to my academic colleagues just as much as I am anybody interested in this phenomenon. And the whole idea was to bring more of them into this conversation. So when I first started writing this book in 2012, there weren't a lot of academics involved in this. And then fortunately, the 2017 New York Times article came out.
Sure.
This book came out in 2019, and there's been a snowball effect. But it is a dense scientific book because it needs to be, especially in making the case for this argument, which, my background is as a biological anthropologist, it draws a lot from that. So noticing that and people sort of struggling with some of the terminology at times, I wrote a second book called or not Revelation, it's the third one, the Extra Tempestro Model, which is more cases. So it looks at different case studies over 90 years on 5 different continents and brings the same science in, but in the context of narratives, like what happened to people. So it's more stories that you can kind of put on the audiobook and listen to. And then this third one was just kind of a fun project where I wanted to reach a different audience because I noticed some of my friends were interested in this, but not reading the books at all and didn't really care about the science. So I wrote this science
Your fun
fiction.
friends, the more fun friends,
The
rather than the
ones you would wanna
academic
hang
ones.
out with at a
The
party.
drinkers.
Yeah, you don't want to do some shots.
The guys
and
with a
hang out
lot of
these guys.
opinions.
Right, and very open-minded, funny, just funny people, So I kind of wrote this for people like that. And it's satire, but it's a kind of a time travel, just raunchy, sexual, drug-filled escapade through the past, and it sort of rewrites a lot of the narrative around Revelation, the last book of the Bible, and sort of flips the script a little bit. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a science fiction book, so it's very, very different than the other two, but still it brings in all of these same ideas. It just does it in the context of this largely a woman who travels back from the future to reteach people how to have sex. She's a sex researcher that goes all the way back into 20,000 years ago in France to start her research.
Must have smelled way worse back then, without a doubt.
Or better, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
who
more
knows?
nature
You're
back
right.
then.
You didn't have expo.
Well, earlier we were talking about you can call it the one timeline type scenario, and you were saying how you can really you can. I was curious. Can you give us one piece of tech that you think you can draw a direct line from that is foreseeable now, especially in our time right now, that shows up either in scientific or anecdotal evidence from these events that are happening? So even based off the second book, there might be some testimony in there, people talking about things they've been subjected to that kind of lines up with something that we're starting to get now. Do you see that those themes pop up a lot where it's like, holy cow, this is NFT, not NFT, what's it called when you scan NFC, whatever it is. This is paying for stuff scanning. But then you take a direct line a million years later and it's holographic or it's something like
Right.
if you take all the steps, it becomes you can trace it. You see that happening a lot within the.
That's a great question. I don't know if I've been asked that directly, but it's such an important thing because that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this book is to show this cultural continuity, this technological continuity in our toolkit. What a lot of people don't realize is all of our tools, the computers that we're speaking to each other on right now, are the direct descendants of the first stone tools 2.5 to 3 million years ago. We're just talking about descent with modification. So everything's built on top of what came before. It's sort of this compounding technological change. And so, yeah, to answer your question, there are a couple that I talk about, I think, in my second book. One is the this one's kind of weird. I guess we were just talking about sex in the past, so it's not that weird. But the little device they
whatever.
put on men for the semen samples,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
they collect the gametes. We have that technology right now. It's being used in Japan to help people who are donating sperm or getting tested for infertility issues.
I did not know that.
I
That's
know
Yeah,
either.
they stick their junk in this little tube and it does the job for them.
You know, it's interesting you say that because our producer Pat is doing that right now.
Yeah, send them to Japan.
I don't know why.
Bring one of these back. And we could all
Japan.
take turns donating some samples.
Yeah, we'll get them all together and we'll have it'll be like a time capsule.
Yeah. No, that's one of those parties with friends that maybe gets a little bit weird.
See, there you go. So you're saying you add 100,000 years onto that, and then you're thinking about how streamlined that product would be. You know?
Yeah, and I don't think we have to. Honestly, one of the other oversights of my first book is that I was talking about just hundreds of thousands of years, but in writing and researching my second book, I realized that a lot of these contact cases involve people that look just like us. They act just like us. They have kitchens and bathrooms, and their clothes are all strewn about. Whitley Strieber talks about that in one of his books, where it was just a mess. Like they were definitely living in this ship. But
And then you have the stories of the Nordics. The Nordics seem
absolutely,
yeah.
and East Asian looking individuals, like
Sure.
again Whitley, who talked about in Communion that these people looked human but not quite human. They had Oriental eyes, as he said, or East Asian characteristics, but still had a physiological form almost identical to a modern human, just slightly more evolved, larger eyes, larger head, smaller chin, that kind of thing. But then, yeah, when we're talking about the tall grays or mantis-like beings, that might be hundreds of thousands, millions of years into the future.
Sure.
Just to circle back to your question, though, one other thing that sticks out to me is exogenesis chambers. As you have people, quite a few, I guess. Who's the one that wrote Incident at Devil's Den?
I don't know.
Can't remember his name. But he walked into this ship, and he's one of many people that have described this, where there's rows and rows of incubation chambers. So they're growing these fetuses, and he's quoted in this book. It's funny, in his audio book he says this, but not in the written version. But he's looking at this thing. He's like, "Oh, what is that?" It turned its head. It looked at me. Oh no, fuck no! This is a human. So he realized, even in that juvenile form, that they're incubating sort of a human alien hybrid. And you know, that's interesting because we have that technology now. We're developing that technology at this very moment. They're testing it on sheep and other animals where they're growing fetuses. They're test tube animal babies that they're growing in these little sacs. So it's another characteristic of cultural continuity where you could see that technology being used in the future. And I talk about how that would be really important for things like social change. You know, like a lot of the reason that we have, I mean, there's a ton of reasons, patriarchy being a big one, but one of the reasons why women are paid less money on the dollar than men is because they bear the burden of child rearing. There's just no way around that. It's a biological aspect of males and females. So there could be a lot of things that change if we start to incubate our babies outside of the body, and just sort of bring equality in a different capacity than what we had otherwise.
Interesting. So like almost making the idea of pregnancy, the idea that we have of pregnancy, null and void.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then people are like, well, don't you miss out on like that bonding of the baby? But a lot of researchers, especially in psychology, don't think that's the case, that you would still have a moment where the baby's born and you could have that initial, bonding contact that's made physically, emotionally, mentally, consciously. So I don't know. It would definitely it would change things, but maybe change for the better.
And you never know. This is just a shot in the dark. There might be some reasoning for if that, like the story you just told. We don't know what's going to happen to the human race. There might be some sort of, this is totally shot in the dark, like I said, but some reasoning why that has to be done in the future, like some sort of cataclysmic event that happened that makes it a necessity to make humans like that, or to repopulate the earth. Or that's what I mean. The other thing I was going to say is another hint that makes a lot of sense to me that it could be us coming back is anecdotal stories. Like the Ariel School speaks to me a lot. There's multiple occurrences in where people are contacted temporarily about the idea of destroying the planet, and for me that screams us being like, we're coming back to warn you, like it's, hey, don't mess with this. And that's either they're living simultaneous with us here, or like what we're talking about, it's us being like, we can kind of course correct this or correct it for the one timeline.
Absolutely. And an argument I made in a lecture I gave in Phoenix last year is why would they care? If they're extraterrestrials from a different planet, why would they care if we blow ourselves up or have to live underground or whatever? And yeah, the other thing is, how would they know unless they know the future? And there's tons and tons of instances where they tell us somewhat benign things even. Like there's this case, one of the first case studies in my second book, this guy was told, you can't talk about this yet, but toward the end of your life, this will be more commonly understood, these contact events, UFOs, and you'll be able to talk about it. It's just a little thing where they knew the future and about what time humanity would start to discuss this topic.
It's set up.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
That's interesting. Where was that? That was a story you heard from somebody you interviewed?
No, he's dead now. Mike and Leo Dworshak were their names, two boys that grew up in South Dakota, and then eventually he moved to Montana. His brother died in the Korean War. But there's a lot of instances like that where just little things, if you pay attention, indicate that they know the future. And how do you know the future unless you have come from the future or can see it in some capacity?
Right.
But yeah, I completely agree with you, Sean, that the Ariel school, all of the warnings about take care of the earth, they don't even really seem to care about us. Like genocides take place and all kinds of bad things arguably for us and humanity, but it's all about this planet. And my editor made me cut this out, unfortunately, but I think it's a good analogy, so I'm still going to use it despite him. That it's like being the last person in line with 3 porta potties at a music festival that they oversold tickets to. Like these future humans, if they are us, they're the last guy in line.
Right.
And we're shitting all over this porta potty right now, just absolutely destroying it.
They're scrambling.
And they have to, So you could see, why they would want us to take care of the planet, because they're stakeholders in it, because they're going to inherit this planet at some point.
Right. And I don't, the idea that you can poke holes in the idea that I think if radiation is your currency, the nukes we had put us on the radar for these. If it's from somewhere else, they call it. Dan Soder, super funny comic. When I did his podcast, he talked about it's the ant with a handgun. It's like once we got on the at the table with radiation and the power level. But I still don't see why that would affect. I agree with you where it's like. But if they're not here, they're going, oh, we're going to tell you not to do this because we just care about your plan. It makes more sense to be like, no. It affects us because we're here. We're here. We need it. We want to keep it going.
Paul Hynek, Jan Hynek's son, always says, how would they find us and why would they care? And he uses this in the context of the time travel model because he's sort of team time travel as well. And he's right. How would they find us in the vastness of space? And even if they did, why would they care so much? How would they be here all the time? Especially because we don't see some super highway with UFOs flying, in and out of the atmosphere.
Right.
So they materialize, they dematerialize. That's what we'd expect to see with the time machine, that they would pop in and out of our 4-dimensional reference frame.
But if, and this is a question I have, and if what you and Sean are saying are right, and these are future humans, they're basically saying, don't fuck the planet up. Is that kind of a hopeful sign that we haven't blown each other to smithereens with nuclear war, or am I just being too glasses half full with that?
No, I think you're correct because it has to get. If we're on this narrative, it has to get to the point. If that's what it is, it has to get to that point where we're being warned.
Can't be totally annihilating.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. No,
right.
We said, it could be partially annihilated.
Exactly.
It could be some stuff going on,
or almost entirely annihilated.
Almost entirely
you
annihilated.
only need like 1 dude, 5 women, and a bunch of incubation chambers,
exactly.
and you're good to go.
You need a matrix ship, and you're good to go.
Yeah. No, I had a buddy, a friend who did read my first book. And he was like, I was always afraid about an alien invasion as a kid. And then I read this and I was convinced that these are future humans. And then I realized why. Why would they ever do this? It's almost like the grandfather paradox on a species-wide level. Like we wouldn't expect our descendants to come back and annihilate us and take our resources like we would with extraterrestrials who would find us and see this beautiful, delicious earth that we live on and then take everything from us and maybe take us and slave us. I don't know. But the fact that that's not happening, and for the most part, they seem to be benevolent, or at least they
Right.
don't, really care too much about us. I think that's
barely-
also something to.
Yeah, I think the only one I've heard of is Colaris, is the Brazilian one
Yeah.
that George Knapp talks about, and those guys.
And that was probably some drunk teenagers who stole the time machine and went back and started zapping people.
That was-
I don't know. That one's weird. It's an outlier. And we shouldn't throw outliers out by any means.
No,
We should consider those.
Right.
But yeah, that is a more malevolent type of interaction.
And then they have there was one in.
Can you
in-
explain this?
Colaris was,
Yeah,
it was what,
'cause I've never heard of this. I'm new to this.
All right, yeah. So in Brazil, in Colaris, Brazil, there was a multiple occurrences of people getting hunted and mutilated and chased down and injured, and people getting killed from supposed extraterrestrial
beings?
NHI. Yeah, and it was going on. I forget the time frame, but it was not just. It wasn't just one night. Put it that way. It was happening for a big chunk of time, and there was cases of like human bodies that are mutilated, and then people. There's all sorts of things. We'll look it up, and we'll talk about it another time on the pod.
Yeah.
But it's people getting shocked, and then describing these orbs they're seeing, and then it being in the newspapers in Brazil for I think weeks, right? So
Yeah, it went on for a while.
it's a documented case, and they talked
Most
about
of the
it.
people that died, though, just for nuance, most people that died of heart attacks from being scared,
From being so
of what was
freaked out.
happening.
Yeah,
they
so
weren't just murdering people across the board. A couple of people did die, but people would get like laser-like burns on them, like they were shooting lasers. It's a really weird case.
It's a
Definitely
really weird
worth
case.
exploring.
And then the other one that I've heard that wasn't even malevolent. It was the Iraqi pilot, or Iranian pilot, who chased down, and he just got to a point where it was just, but not by accident, but the thing it shut off his instruments, and then he
That's
got-
a little different.
It's a little different.
That's a little different.
And there's a lot of occurrences of that where it's like
There's
based off.
another one too, but a guy named Moncla who flew out to intercept a UFO and disappeared. They never found his plane. They never found him.
Oh wow!
So yeah, those cases do exist for sure.
but it's
not all
not
love
the
and
norm.
light,
Yeah,
but-
yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's not the norm.
Dr.
Oh,
Masters.
by the way, just real quick, Terry Lovelace was the guy whose name I couldn't remember. He
Oh,
wrote
okay.
Incident
What's the
at
name of
Devil's
the
Den.
name of the book?
Incident at Devil's Den. It's really fascinating.
Check it out.
He was in the military and had a series of interactions with another military member. It's a really fascinating case.
Well, Dr. Masters, if it's okay, if we could just take a break just for a second, we have to send a new Zoom link, not to let you know how the bodies are buried or the hot dogs are made. But I didn't realize I hadn't upgraded yet, so I just upgraded. But because of that, we have to send a new link. But I want to hear all about, our audience wants to hear all about your experience with these entities, these extra tempestrials, and I have a bunch of questions regarding that, and a few more questions. So we'll be right back. Let's just reset for a little bit. And I know you've talked about this before, but this story is so fascinating. I think I would love to hear just a short recap before I ask a couple questions. But can you go through the events leading up to your encounter? And one of the things when you were talking about your encounter, I didn't get a sense of where your emotional state was. Were you afraid when this was happening?
Not really. No, definitely confused. Shocked, I think would be a good word. But I didn't really feel fear, I guess, largely because of the way they did it. And yeah, for your audience that isn't familiar with this encounter, it was I guess it was October 14th, was the day of my presentation, and I was given a lecture at the International UFO Congress in I think Tempe or Mesa. I just say Phoenix because I don't really know all of the suburbs. But it was at this hotel in one of those places, and I gave my talk. I met with this really interesting individual who flew out to meet with me to tell me about his amazing experiences that I think he's working on starting to go public with. Lifetime encounters with future humans. So I give my talk. I take a 3-hour nap. I missed the VIP dinner, half of it at least. I showed up late. I was like, I don't know what happened. I never take naps, but I just felt really compelled to do so and slept for 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon, which was super weird for me. And then we go down to this Halloween party. and I ran out of money. They had a bar set up down there, and I bought a beer for like $12, and didn't have enough to cover the second beer. So one of the people who worked there, Heidi is her name. She's reluctantly public about this too. She comes up to me and says, "I have a key to the VIP room. Why don't we go up there and get some beers?" Because in that party they got really, really good beers and like those giant Costco bottles of vodka and whiskey and stuff that I didn't touch. The only beer I had had was at that downstairs party. So we
Yeah,
go up
if you had
there.
had the Costco vodka, we may not be having this segment. I'd be like,
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know what
it'd be a
happened,
very,
man.
It'd be a very different account, probably, for sure. But no, stone cold sober. She takes me up to this room, and I'd start stuffing my pockets with beers. You know, at this point, I know a lot of people in this community, and I've made good friends with a lot of them. Uh, sorry, hopefully, can you guys edit stuff out?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, a buddy of mine's coming over right now. He didn't know I had an interview. And I just don't want him to drive all the way out here.
We're wrapping up at about. We can do 15 more minutes.
you wanna do
Whatever
15
need.
more
We can
minutes?
go
Oh,
whatever.
the amount of times, it doesn't matter. I don't want him to drive out here.
Right.
And then
Well, we'll definitely be done in. Yeah, we'll definitely be done in a half hour.
I'll tell him that.
Yeah,
Done
half
in
hour.
about 30.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Sorry about that. So anyway, yeah, so we go up here and I'm stuffing my pockets with beers to take down to our friends so they don't have to pay $12 a beer too. And she's like, "Actually, we can't go down yet. My friend Eric wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Who's Eric?" Skipping ahead a little bit, we're there for an annoyingly long period of time. There's this fun Halloween party with the DJ taking place downstairs, and I'm not allowed to leave. And eventually I go out on the balcony and I'm just sitting there accepting my fate that I'm going to be stuck in this room for the entire night. And all of a sudden, this Eric guy comes out, who at the time I didn't know who he was. He was a complete stranger. I knew Heidi a little bit because I gave a talk at the same conference 3 years before, but not super well. Like she was kind of an acquaintance. But we vibed. She's super cool. I met her daughter and her husband and stuff. So Eric comes out, he slides his knee into my crotch, and his face is like 8 inches from my face. And he says, "I know you've been thinking about quitting lately, and we'd really prefer you not do that." So now I'm sitting here with a complete stranger with his knee in my junk and his face right here telling me a thought that was only in my head. Because I had been thinking this about a week before the conference. I was going to do this last conference, finish this last book, and just kind of dip from the whole scene because it was exhausting and still is. But I take breaks more often now, so it's not quite as bad. So yeah, I didn't really know how to process that. And I said, "How could you know that?" You know, that was just a thought in my head. And I changed the pronoun to they because I wasn't talking to Eric. I never was. Heidi also wasn't Heidi.
Is
From
Eric
the
a
time she
pseudonym
approached me.
or no? Or is Eric?
No, Eric's
Okay.
very public about this now too.
Okay.
He kind of had to be, but he's starting to do it more and more, which is great. I think he's even going to be in a doco series coming out soon. So yeah, I know now that Eric is a person. I didn't know at the time. All I knew is there's this stranger that knows everything about me. They know my future, and they wanted to put things in my brain. You know, that was pretty much it. But then I talked to Jesse Michaels about this first. I talked to him about it when I was in LA soon after it happened. And it just sort of, he was one of the first people I talked to about it and just flowed out of me. Like I was still really fucked up from it at that time and my brain was just a mess. And he's just looking at me after this interview about, untelepathic abduction type things. And him and his cameraman were just like, "Whoa, dude, that's insane." So about a year after, Jesse was bringing me down to LA to finish this documentary project he was working on about my research, and I kind of knew he would want to talk about it, but I hadn't touched it in like a year. I mean, I didn't know if I could, and the reaction was exactly like what I thought. "Oh, Masters is a grifter, or he's making shit up." I'm just trying to tell people what happened to me. And it was really shocking and traumatic at first. Like I said, I don't think I was scared at the moment, just kind of overwhelmed. And we can get into what happened after that, I guess. But it started with, yeah, just we know you've been thinking about quitting and very politely asking me not to. And then eventually the conversation turned all telepathic. and they asked if they could put 3 things in my brain that would be important for some future time or times. And by this point, they allowed me to remember, like to know me or my soul or self or whatever it is that pilots these little meat vessels. And so I agreed. They put 3 things in my brain. They told me exactly what would happen. My eyes would go black. I would see and feel the information coming in. All of that was true. And they told me I wouldn't have access to it until it was time for the information to come out. And I agreed, and they did that and sent me on my way. Went straight down the hall, laid down, clothes still on, feet still on the floor, slept for at least 12 or 13 hours. I don't remember the exact number. Woke up and just started crying uncontrollably, like just
Wow.
a physiological response, like could not stop crying. Took quite some time. Actually, what actually ended it was this Eric guy was sent back, and they identified a place I would be in this hotel lobby where no one else was around. And he came around the corner and put his hand on my shoulder and looked down and said, "Are you okay?" And I was still just a mess from the night before. And I was like, uh-huh. And what he did something, they did something through him at that moment. Because I was on a panel with like John Ramirez and Micah Hanks and all kind of Bryce Zabel and a bunch of people, and wasn't really in a functional state. So they sent him back for, I guess, a follow-up psychological assessment of sorts and sort of helped me get through the rest of the day.
That's it. Could I just ask one question and then
Yeah.
jump in, Sean? When did it seem like the disposition of Eric and these extra tempestrials, did his disposition change depending on which entity was channeling him? That's my question. Like, did you know, like, are you like, you're like, okay, like, was it a combination of Eric and these extra tempestrials, which I don't think we've explained what that is just yet. Or was it, do you think, just them, and he was almost, similar to, like, I guess it, like, for lack of a better term, a puppet, like a hand puppet or something.
Sure.
Yeah, man, you guys, I've never been asked that before either. That's another fantastic question.
Yeah.
I
You can't
see
see
the
what we just
problem
did.
is
You would not compliment us if we just saw what we did.
the problem is I didn't know Eric, so I had no way of knowing who he was, what he was like. He legit rolled up, and I've talked to him a lot since then.
And he
Once
has
I
no memory
realized-
of this encounter, right?
Eric?
Yeah.
No, Eric remembers.
Oh, he does
Yeah.
remember. He remembers the whole thing.
Heidi doesn't remember. She knows something weird happened, but I'm pretty sure they took over her mind at that moment she approached me downstairs at the party. I think she went into I've looked it up, and the best word I can find is deep trance mediumship, where you're being used as this vessel.
Yeah.
Hand puppet might be a little, a little
Sorry, I wish
condescending,
That's what it is in prison.
yeah, right. So yeah, I can't know. I have gotten to know Eric since then, and him and his personality, and what was coming through him was very different from him. And they even continued, like, I would get Facebook messages for months after this happened that were from Eric, but it wasn't. It was from these same entities that were still channeling through him. And I know it wasn't him because they would say things that were very specific to what I was thinking about in that very moment. But because that connection was still made, they could use him as that medium again. So I don't know. That's a great question. It's quite possible. Some people have asked me, I talked about this at the Esalen Institute last year, and some people asked me afterwards, like, do you think this was your higher self? Also a great question. I don't know. I don't see how my higher self could take over the minds and bodies of 2 people. It kind of feels like something more is going on. I don't know.
That
I
doesn't
also
ring true
don't know
for
about
me.
calling them extra tempestrials because they did know the future. That was very, very clear from not just them putting things in my brain for the future, but they knew my own future too. So in that sense, I guess.
Oh, some things that have proven to be true, you're saying, like with your future. Like some things they said in that moment that turned out to be true.
Well, kind of, yeah. Hopefully not, because it was about my long-term health. But
Oh shit.
Oh, jeez.
yeah.
Well, also,
but-
I feel like if any place that's gonna have like I feel like when they have these because you're at a convention, it's like to have that level of energy related to this topic there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it's just they like found out about it and like flew out on on Spirit Airlines, which would make sense.
That would make sense. Yeah.
But
Nice one.
no, but I think it's like
He's been trying to get that spirit joke in for the last 3 months.
I nailed
I
it.
thought of it now.
I mean, you absolutely nailed it. Sorry I didn't have a yes and. I should have backed you up there. I wasn't ready for it.
I know, but but I'm saying like, if this stuff like you were saying as far as because there's those themes show up in both what you're talking about as far as it's us coming back, and also the idea that this NHI is ever present. So the idea that if the NHI is consciousness based, or even if it's us, and we've realized that the science behind consciousness, and it's us coming back on a consciousness train, whatever you want to call it, where it would meet up to have that amount of shared energy for that to happen would be one of these things. So many like-minded people.
That's,
so many
I never even thought of that.
Subatomic, whatever the hell's going on. Hey, what? Yeah, it could be rampant if it's the right
that's
moment.
a great
That
point
makes a
because
lot of sense.
there is a collective energy with these things. Like the way they can summon entities through these mediumship experiences is through the group energy that they bring into that and really putting it into that moment. That's a great point. Something else that popped in my head that kind of may help answer your question too, Dan, is how many were involved? Were they different? I think part of the reason they exclusively used we and us was because I wasn't just talking to one individual through Eric, but it's sort of some kind of collective social consciousness, something related to source consciousness, perhaps. So a collective of sorts, if you will. I don't think it was just one person from the other side, like how you have the Seth material or the raw contact is they consider themselves a social mind complex, and I feel like it was more of that type of thing than just one individual, like what you have with the Seth mediumship channeling situation. But I don't know, honestly. I don't know exactly who or what I was talking to. It's really hard to put words to, but I do know that it was a very just expanded consciousness, energetic, highly benevolent type of being or beings that were able to communicate through these two people in that moment.
So very aligned with the I'm not sure, I know it's not the same encounter, but what and this is happening like this week. It's the hottest topic right now. Is very aligned with the Jake Barber assessment of what the energy feels like.
Yeah, and that was kind of cool. It's one of these things like how I started writing my first book in 2012, and then the New York Times article was 2017, and it's just the timing was spot on because my book came out in early 2019. Same thing with this. Like I stuck my neck out there and talking about this publicly in some pretty large venues, and I was kind of sitting alone out there for a little while. Like people have had experiences like this. I'm not saying I'm unique in that respect, but considering my background and where I was coming from and being in academia, it was a pretty big leap of faith.
Sure.
And then, soon after that, the Telepathy Tapes becomes the #1 podcast in the world. Jake Barber's talking about his interaction with this craft or entities or whatever. So it's really great to see. And I feel like I'm not just sitting alone on this wobbly branch any longer. And I think that's going to continue because we should absolutely be talking about this stuff. Like the stigma, I get it. It's there. I've dealt with that. But these types of things that really show us how much more there is to this reality than what we understand, how much more there is to consciousness, and just the way we could and likely will eventually as humans interact with each other in a way that supersedes these vocalized auditory things that we do, and just the mind-to-mind communication. I think we do it a lot of time without realizing it, and the telepathy tapes are really a good indication of that.
Sure. I think you touched on speaking about coming from academia and how it was a risk to really kind of come out with this info. I think that to me, somebody like me, and I think also you, Dan, that puts the stamp of authenticity on these types of things.
Yeah.
To me, like when you have that level of like, hey, there's a lot I talk about all the time, Elizondo, whoever else, where it's like there's a lot to lose in the mortal world for coming out like this.
Especially, if you're a professor,
absolutely.
And John Mack's experience
Right.
with being discredited at
Yeah,
Harvard.
sure.
You guys, I really do think this, Dr. Masters, I'm just saying it, but I think you guys are heroes, that are coming out and,
I don't know about
coming
that.
out and saying it. And no, I do. And I'm not just saying that because I desperately want something to visit me, and it seems like they have no interest whatsoever. I'm too horny for it, I guess. I don't know. I literally could. I literally could like open my window and show my butt to the moon for probing, and they would still be like, "No, thanks, buddy. You want it too bad."
So
I would say channel that hornosity because it might be your best. It might be your best asset in this situation. Hey, just real quick though, I started to say, speaking of the difficulty, I started to say that when I was going back down to talk to Jesse, like I really did struggle with that, because it is something that it's a risk, especially in this job. And I remember sitting out on my balcony. It's going to sound like I'm a crier. I hardly ever cry. And the thing that they did to me was, I think, the result of what they did to me, like a physiological
100%,
response. I wasn't even like sad or upset. I was confused as all hell.
Right.
But it wasn't like a crying, like, oh no, poor me. It was, I just couldn't stop.
Right.
You went through something incredible. You went through something incredible, and your body reacted.
Ontological shock.
Yeah.
My epistemological worldview was completely changed. But I did actually have like an emotional cry the day before I went back down to finish that doco with Jesse, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But one of the questions I asked in that telepathic exchange was, can I talk about this? And they specifically said, we want you to talk about this. So I felt sort of an obligation to do so. And I dedicated my second book to all of the brave women and men who have talked about these experiences. Because who cares if you're in academia? Everybody has a job. Everybody has a life.
Sure.
Everybody has friends and family that are going to react to this type of thing. So yeah, I just, I don't know. I decided that it was more important than me. Whatever I am as an individual and whatever shit I get for this, I'll take it, because this thing is clearly much more important than just me and my experience as one individual.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I always mention on the show, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, and it's all related, and it's involved somebody. Leslie Kane it was based off her book. Is that the series on Netflix, Surviving Death? And one of the first things they get into is it's the near. Your story reminds me a lot of it. There's a woman who describes this kayaking incident where she had a near-death experience. She was clinically dead for a half hour, and had a very similar experience to what you had, where this thing where describing themselves as we, like this consciousness, if it's us or if it's not. Yeah. And at the end of her whole story, it's more involved than that. And I've talked about this show all the time on this podcast. But she reveals that she's a medical doctor. And like that's what I mean. Like I think that was the whole point of that. Like, hey, you have this fantastical story. Somebody's going, I don't know, and then at the end she goes, I'm a doctor.
I mean, it's just hard, like you're like Leslie, I'm sorry, not Leslie Keane, but the woman that you're just describing, and Dr. Masters and Jake Barber and Elise Elizondo. This is a different crew. This is a different demo of people that are coming out.
Absolutely.
These are academics. These are it's harder to throw water on it.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't matter. Unfortunately, it does, because of the way our society is structured and being a meritocracy and whatnot. But it shouldn't matter. And honestly, one thing I try to do in my second book was just look at all of these cases that are extremely valid. They're verifiable in most cases, and look for patterns across them. Because we shouldn't just listen to pilots about UFOs or listen to academics about UFOs or telepathy or whatever. We should be listening to everyone that's credible and take all of these accounts and then try to pull from those and get as much information as possible and look for these patterns that emerge from those, because I think that's where we're going to learn the most. And it's so great to see that we've finally moved on from cockpit videos to people's actual experiences. And speaking of Leslie Kane, she just had a great National Geographic season 2 of her series come out, and the last 3 episodes are entirely about experiencers, which I think is fantastic.
Great.
Oh wow, I'm excited to.
She's great.
To check that out.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
I have. She's one of the few I haven't read yet. But I'm really excited. I guess. Are there I guess the reason, though, that, when Sean and I are saying it's better that the doctorates and people like you and people like these helicopter pilots, it's better when they come out because they have something to lose, in a lot of ways. Right. There is that gambling.
Even if it is bullshit, it's,
exactly. There's something to lose.
Meaning like it shouldn't happen, but it does.
Do you think there are people though, like that you would steer clear of in these field that I'm like, all right, well, this feels a little bit more snake oily, you know, and I say this for people like me who want to believe in a lot of stuff and I feel like can be swindled. Do you think that, I mean, obviously in almost every societal event, there's going to be bad actors in it. Like who would you be weary of in this?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I don't really often read comments on YouTube or Twitter or wherever, but my favorite one is someone called me a silver-tongued grifter. And I was like, I mean, I like that. I'm not, but I like that. You know, it's kind of poetic in a way. And we should absolutely all be weary of that. And you're right, I hadn't really thought about it that way because if you have more to lose, then it's less likely that you're making things up because you don't want to lose those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not always the case. There's certainly a lot of people out there that are grifting, you know, they are trying to make money off the phenomenon, which is obviously, you know, a hot topic right now. It's really great that it's entered the cultural zeitgeist to that extent. I feel like when I first started in all of this, I first started talking about this publicly in 2018. And at that time, I feel like there were far more individuals that I would definitely not trust, snake oil type people. I think it's gotten better. I think sort of as it's entered the mainstream more, it's gotten harder for the grifters to maintain the grift and to keep the lies going. And that's another reason I always say that I'm not lying, because I just can't maintain a lie, you know, over time. And it seems like it would be so hard.
Yeah.
It'd be exhausting. Yeah. And I don't have the energy for that type of shit. So
I've had a second family for 5 years now.
Well, it's out now.
Now it's out. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. That'll do it.
Hopefully,
Well,
your other family doesn't watch the show.
Even because I'm one of the and I was always interested in the topic, but you mentioned it a couple of times, and for a lot of people, the 2017 New York Times article was like a nuclear bomb, you know. And
Yeah, it was.
So in regards to what you're saying, and I think the idea of these snake oil salesmen, like Dan said, being weeded out is the idea that, because I think even back then the disinformation arm was way stronger.
That's a good point.
You have your Richard Doty's. So who knows how many of these grifters were kind of
the Mirage Men aspect of it all.
Sure, like the idea.
That's a really good point.
And the more that this thing, you know, these jobs change over, you might have your Christian, your couple of Christians in there, whatever it is, but all this stuff flips over. And when they say one of the reasons that the slow disclosure is happening is because they have more of an open mind, and then so if you have that, you get rid of your. Obviously, you're not getting rid of it, but you have it's a weaker arm, your disinformation channel.
I think that, and I think that globally, because things don't seem to be going particularly well almost everywhere in the world. I think
in
that
life,
I do think that there's like government is like, well, fuck it, let's. There's a little bit more aspect of it, like maybe this will help,
which is like pretty much happened. It's like it's already happened.
Well, dude, this has been fascinating.
Yeah,
Dr.
thank
Masters,
you so much.
to have you on.
Yeah,
and we'd love to have you on at any moment. But please, promote your new book and your old books and your Instagram,
and
whatever
website. Yeah, everything.
Yeah, I mean, well, I already talked about the books, and like I said, they're all different. So if you're, I wouldn't even know how to say that in a PR kind of way. The first one's hard science. Second one is science, but more narratives, and the third one's just drunken debauchery.
Third's fun.
So pick your poison, I guess. But no, I've got a website, michaelpmasters.com. I've kind of fallen by the wayside with updating it regarding speaking events and interviews and things, but there is a contact page, so people can go there to get in touch with me, and there's links to the books there as well. So yeah, it's been an absolute delight. Love talking to you fellas, and appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man.
Thank
you so much.
And real quick, guys, make sure subscribe Burbs Bros on YouTube, at Burbs Bros on Instagram, and Burbs Bros podcast at Burbs Bros Pod or podcast. Pod. Burbs Bros Pod. I always mess that one up. Burbs Bros Pod at gmail.com to email us. And then Dan St. Germain.
Follow Sean on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. Follow Burbs Bros on Instagram.
Follow me on Instagram.
Follow Dr. Masters on Instagram. Michael Masters. Follow
Follow Pat on
We
Instagram.
have Burbs Bros' YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel. Come, do all the things.
Do all the things. Help us out.
Do all the things. Help us out with all the things.
Thank you
But
once
thank
again,
you so
Dr.
much,
Masters.
That
Thanks
was
to
awesome.
Pat.
Thank you.
We'll see you next
Yeah,
week, guys.
appreciate
Thanks so
it.
much. Bye-bye.